After Angelica swallowed a mysterious pill, her boyfriend Jonas appeared beside her, holding her hand tightly. However, if you were at the scene, you would see that there was no man there. Only Angelica was present. In other words, Jonas's appearance was merely a sensory phenomenon. At the same time, due to the drug's effects, Angelica reported that she could see strangers all around. Indeed, Angelica saw 8 people scattered throughout the world: a Mexican idol actor, a female fighter training in South Korea, an Indian leader, and a bus driver in Africa. Simultaneously, these 8 individuals also saw Angelica. Sometimes she appeared in their world, and other times they were as if they were right in front of her. At that moment, Angelica asked Jonas to protect them, sounding much like a last request. Jonas heard the sound of a car brake outside. Realizing that their enemy had arrived, Angelica said he was coming too, and just as she finished speaking, a silver-haired man appeared behind her. His name was Whispers. The moment Whispers appeared, Angelica began to tremble, clearly terrified of him. She urged Jonas to leave quickly, but Jonas could not see Whispers. Angelica pulled out a handgun, intending to end her life. Whispers continuously seduced and threatened Angelica, whispering in her ear. Unable to endure any longer, Angelica pulled the trigger without hesitation. This was the only way she believed she could escape. However, since seeing Angelica, fates of the other 8 had changed. To them, it was like encountering a ghost. Unexpectedly witnessing a woman take her own life left everyone feeling horrified. For instance, Will was awakened by the blaring music in the middle of the night. He intended to find the neighbor to interrogate, but discovered that there was essentially no one inside. He didn't realize that his emotions had connected with Riley, who was enjoying herself at the bar. Moreover, in Will's dream, late, he suddenly found himself in a bizarre scene. He saw a woman using a gun to take her own life. Overcome with fear, Will woke up from the nightmare. Even stranger was that during his patrol, he passed by a place that felt very familiar. When he entered, he discovered that this was the location where the woman had taken her life in his dream the previous night. The scene matched his memory exactly. Aside from the missing handgun, everything else was identical to what he recalled. Will immediately recounted everything to his colleagues, hoping they would believe him, but they dismissed him impatiently and walked away, clearly finding the ordeal too outrageous. Then an even stranger event occurred. During a meeting, the superiors presented a photo of a top criminal named Jonas. In an instant, Will felt a strong sense of familiarity with this man. He had no idea that Jonas was deeply connected to Angelica. From that point on, Will was drawn into a massive whirlpool of events. That night, Will was tortured by a migraine that kept him awake. He went to the convenience store to buy some medicine, but when he looked up, he saw Jonas reflected in the mirror. As Jonas slowly approached him, Will quickly turned around, and Jonas stepped closer, introducing himself and mentioning Will's name. Will was suspicious about this, but Jonas explained that Angelica had told him about Will. Then, like a fortune teller, Jonas started to predict Will's recent situation, stating that in the middle of summer, Will would feel snow. When the skies were clear, Will would feel the rain. He constantly sensed something was off, but couldn't pinpoint the reason. Jonas's accurate predictions made Will shiver. He asked the store clerk if they had seen Jonas, truly fearing that he was having hallucinations. At that moment, Jonas revealed his purpose for being there. He wanted Will to save a woman. She was one of Will's kind, and was currently facing the threat of a brain surgery. Will, however, just wanted to capture Jonas. Jonas then mentioned that he knew Will was hiding a gun at his feet. Sure enough, as Will attempted to act, he was knocked down by Jonas, who quickly jumped into a car and drove away. Will hurriedly chased after Jonas, but heard Jonas's voice in his ear. Glancing back, he was startled to find Jonas sitting in the passenger seat. Will felt like he was going insane as Jonas explained that this was just an expansion of their connection. Hearing this, Will became deep in thought, and the next moment, he found himself in Jonas's car. Jonas praised him for doing well, then began talking about their two-way connection. But the issue was, if Will was here, then who was driving the car behind them? In an instant, Will felt as if an invisible hand pulled him back into the car, and after a struggle to regain control, he crashed Jonas's car. Meanwhile, in America, Nomi, a transgender woman, had a black girlfriend. In the US, gender isn't limited to male and female. There are 56 classifications. People use the term LGBT to encompass them all. During an LGBT gathering, a man appeared. It was Jonas. Suddenly, Nomi fainted, falling straight off her motorcycle. It wasn't that she was allergic to men, but rather because several days earlier, after receiving hormone therapy, a couple had appeared before her, one of whom was Jonas. From that point on, Nomi and the 8 individuals around the globe gained a psychic connection. For example, whatever Nomi saw was transmitted into Kafisa's mind. Similarly, when Nomi was playing cards with her friends, Kala would suddenly feel a dry mouth across the world. Perhaps Nomi's fainting was due to her brain not yet adapting to this connection. However, when Nomi woke up, she realized she had lost her freedom. Indiana, the hospital. Nomi's mother continuously called her by her her old name, Mike. Nomi hated being called that, but her mother remained stubborn. At that moment, a doctor entered and informed Nomi that she had a condition known as undifferentiated frontal lobe syndrome, and she needed immediate surgery. Before Nomi could react, her mother secretly signed a consent form to forcefully authorize surgery on her. As a result, Nomi was illegally confined in the hospital. She knew her mother had always wanted her to return to being a son, believing that perhaps surgery could make that happen. But looking at the attitude of the hospital staff, Nomi felt that something was wrong. Just when she was feeling anxious, Jonas suddenly appeared. He told Nomi that she wasn't sick and needed to find a way to escape. However, upon seeing Jonas, Nomi was frightened, wondering if she was experiencing hallucinations as the doctor suggested. Moreover, the place had been locked down for a long time. How could someone like Jonas have gotten in? After Jonas left, Nomi's phone rang. It was her friend calling. Amanita had bribed a new nurse to get a chance to make a call. Fearing that the hospital wouldn't help, Amanita was worried and wanted to know how Nomi was doing. Nomi recounted her recent experience of hallucinations, suggesting that there might be something wrong with her brain and that she needed surgery. Unexpectedly, Amanita asked Nomi if the man she mentioned was wearing a leather jacket. Nomi was curious as to how Amanita knew about that man. It turned out that before fainting, Nomi was still taking pictures, and Amanita had brought Nomi's phone to the hospital. The camera couldn't produce hallucinations, and the man in the leather jacket had indeed been staring at Nomi at that moment. At the same time, Will, who had been in a car accident, woke up and had become the hero of the police department for capturing Jonas, the #1 target of the Department of Homeland Security. However, Will pulled out his IV, now solely focused on finding Jonas. His colleagues informed him that Jonas had been taken away by superiors immediately after his capture. Quickly, Will managed to uncover the location where Jonas was being held, and it happened to be where an old colleague of Will's father worked. After learning of Will's intentions, the old colleague whispered to him that the case was complicated and that Will shouldn't get involved. With that, he turned away and left. While Will was still feeling confused, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Looking up, he saw Jonas dressed in a prison uniform. Will immediately glanced around. Everyone else looked normal, meaning he was the only one who could see Jonas. Gradually, he reached out to touch Jonas, only to realize that he had tangible feelings. Suddenly, the surroundings changed, and Will found himself in the small cell where Jonas was held. Will was astonished, while Jonas calmly explained that this was somewhat like telepathy, except that if they looked at each other, the communication became two-way. Will touched the wall and skeptically asked why he could feel the coldness of the wall. Jonas replied, in a deep tone, that Will was no longer alone. Just then, a guard came to call Will to leave, interrupting their two-way encounter. On the way to the car, Will tried to focus to reconnect with Jonas, but after several failed attempts, he felt forced to give up. At that moment, Jonas remarked that a two-way meeting wasn't like making a phone call or sending a message. It wouldn't occur just by Will's intention. It had to happen naturally. Next, Jonas explained that it had taken him a long time to learn how to have a two-way meeting. Will was learning faster than Jonas, but Jonas hoped Will would understand the difference between a two-way meeting and resonance. Will asked what resonance meant, and Jonas explained that resonance is the ability to gain the language, knowledge, and skills of other members of the tribe. Curious, Will asked what tribe meant. Jonas replied that there were currently 7 people with abilities similar to Will's. They were like avatars of Will. One of them was in danger, and if they didn't save her, there would only be 6 left. She was currently in San Francisco. Jonas said that the members of the tribe were a unified entity, and Will only needed to focus to sense them. Just then, the door opened, and 3 men in protective suits and gas masks entered without saying a word, escorting Jonas out. Once again, the two-way meeting was interrupted. Will returned to his car, recalling Jonas's instructions, and he tried to use his thoughts to contact Nomi. Quickly, Will saw Nomi being wheeled into the operating room. With Will's help, Nomi's handcuffs were easily released. With nimble agility, she avoided the monitors and made her way to the exit. Thanks to coordination from Amanita, Nomi successfully escaped. It seemed that with this extraordinary ability, Will could accomplish many tasks, including matters of love that could happen swiftly and accurately. Will's love story began with an illusion. Will was in America, while Riley was in London. But one morning, they suddenly appeared in each other's mirrors, causing Will to panic to the point of cutting himself with a razor. Even though Riley was thousands of miles away, she felt the pain too. They thought this bizarre incident was over, only for Will to see Riley's reflection again on the glass of his car while working. Even when he was at a crime scene, Riley appeared right before him. What surprised them this time was that they could not only see each other, but also communicate. Will asked Riley where she lived, and she mentioned that she lived in England, while Will responded that he was in America. Riley was both amazed and delighted, unsure how she could have traveled such a distance. Eventually, they came to understand that that this was a form of psychic connection, a born talent that only a few people in the world possessed. This ability also made their love story romantic. For instance, when Will went to make coffee and returned, he found Riley unexpectedly in his room. Riley had visited Will's room, so Will could just as easily visit hers. She took him on a tour of her home, which was now back in her hometown of Iceland. Riley shared stories about her childhood with Will. Suddenly, her father came in, and he couldn't see Will, so Riley casually said she was talking to herself. After her father left, Will guided her around his own home. As a typical man's house was somewhat messy, Riley couldn't help but notice the neatly arranged vinyl records on the shelf. Surprised at their shared interest, they moved to the window where, from Will's house, they could see a volcano. The view was stunning, and they could even see a train passing by. Though it was rather noisy, Will assured her that she would get used to the noise. At that moment, as Will reached out to touch Riley's hand, both Will and Riley felt each other's love, so they slowly leaned in closer, tilting their heads as they searched for each other's lips. Suddenly, one of Will's colleagues approached and, seeing Will seemingly kissing the air, he looked confused and asked what Will was doing. Will felt a bit embarrassed at that moment. Meanwhile, Riley was out for a walk when an elderly woman suddenly appeared before her. Riley recognized Lisa as another super empath. Lisa took Riley to her home and warned her that returning to Iceland was dangerous due to a biological organization that specialized in capturing super empaths for research. Many super empaths had disappeared after coming here. When Riley asked how Lisa knew all this, Lisa placed her hand on Riley's chest, and then Riley saw Will, who was talking to Jonas. However, Jonas couldn't see Riley through Will, and similarly, Lisa couldn't see Will and Jonas through Riley, but Lisa could sense the love that Riley had for Will. She cautioned Riley that love between super empaths is the most severe form of narcissism. Lisa urged Riley to ask about Will's birthday, and as it turned out, they shared the same year, month, and day. However, when Lisa learned that Will was speaking with Jonas, her expression immediately changed, and she quickly pulled Riley back to the present. She warned Riley that she must not contact Will any longer, saying that if Riley's boyfriend reached out to Jonas, it wouldn't be long before Whispers would find Riley. After delivering this warning, Lisa also vanished. In reality, Jonas was in a laboratory, his body connected to numerous data cables, with Whispers standing next to him. At the same time, Sun in South Korea felt a bit uncomfortable and quickly grabbed a sanitary napkin from her drawer. On the other side of the world, Leto experienced a similar pain and wanted to ask his makeup artist if it was menstrual cramps, but he ultimately struggled to voice his concerns. When Sun stepped out of the bathroom, she found herself appearing in Leto's mirror. Meanwhile, Leto also appeared in her bathroom. Sun was a wealthy heiress in South Korea, and while she was working, chicken suddenly flew onto her desk. In an instant, the chicken vanished. It turned out that a passenger on a bus in Africa couldn't afford the fare and had given Capheus a chicken. Capheus then transmitted his feelings to Sun. It was revealed that Capheus, Sun, and Leto were all super empaths, capable of sharing emotions, knowledge, and skills among themselves. However, they were currently unaware of how powerful this ability truly was. For example, Capheus had finally managed to gather a full bus passengers, only to be stopped by armed robbers. All passengers were robbed thoroughly, and when the robbers saw that Capheus had very little money, they bent down and noticed his bulging pants. They proceeded to strip him, taking out a pouch from within. Capheus desperately pleaded with the robbers to give it back, explaining that it was his mother's antihypertensive medication that could save her life. But the leader of the robbers was unfazed. He slammed his gun against Capheus's head before walking away, leaving Capheus helpless on the ground. At that moment, in an underground boxing gym in South Korea, Sun unintentionally transferred her fury to Capheus. Fueled by this anger, Capheus stood up, no longer the weak man he used to be. He drove the bus, chasing after the robbers. In addition to being a wealthy heiress, Sun was also a talented boxer. Upon catching up to the robbers, Capheus discovered they were armed, but he had the support of a total of 8 super empaths. Will, who was a police officer, had entered Capheus's body, allowing him to shoot with remarkable precision. Will's expert skills enabled Capheus to fire bullet after bullet. Unfortunately, Capheus was attacked from behind and quickly surrounded. He was beaten so badly he began to vomit blood. At a critical moment, Capheus and Sun finally felt a deeper connection with each other. With Sun's involvement, the confrontation turned into a massacre, and the robbers, seeing the tide turning against them, fled. Not only did Capheus retrieve the antihypertensive medication, but he also gained notoriety throughout the area. The next day, his bus was packed with passengers. Choosing his bus meant choosing safety. However, as the saying goes, the taller the tree, the stronger the wind. Halfway through their journey, the bus was stopped by the military, and Capheus's name was called, leading him away. Anxious and uncertain, he was taken deep into the forest, where he discovered that Silas needed needed him to protect his sick daughter. Silas had many enemies, and this mission was no easy task. But when Silas patted a box beside him and opened it to reveal it was filled with antihypertensive medication for Capheus's mother, he didn't think twice and agreed to help. Thus, Capheus began to navigate between powerful forces, slowly learning how to unlock the potential of the super empath group. On that day, when Nomi needed to escape using a vehicle, Capheus stepped forward to share his driving skills with her. It was at that moment he realized the super empaths were always being hunted. Meanwhile, a man contemplated ending his life with a gun, but his reflection in the mirror revealed someone else. When Nomi witnessed this scene, she was frozen in fear. Strange occurrences continued when Nomi, in the hospital, saw a man who had become a vegetable after surgery. This event had taken place the day before. When Nomi hacked into the medical records of the doctor, she discovered that Dr. Peter had conducted 3 surgeries. 2 patients had died, while 1 was missing. Out of curiosity, Nomi and her friend decided to visit the hospital. She pretended to be Todd's granddaughter. When Nomi saw Todd in a dazed state after his skull had been opened, she realized this was not about saving people, it was entirely about using them as test subjects. Overcome with fear, Nomi cried and forced Amanita to promise that she would never allow Nomi to end up like Todd. Determined to uncover the truth, Nomi and Amanita went to a restaurant where, not long after, Peter also arrived to buy breakfast. Nomi aimed her device at Peter. Soon, they had breached his phone, downloading contacts, call logs, emails, and passwords. Just then, Peter received a call from Dr. Kolovi. He glanced at Nomi and then hurriedly left. Both Nomi and Amanita sensed something suspicious. Had they been discovered? Unable to suppress her curiosity, Nomi called Kolovi, pretending to be Peter. To her shock, he asked if she was Nomi, expressing his eagerness to meet her. Feeling a mix of panic and intrigue, Nomi remembered that Peter had to leave for a business trip today. After Peter boarded his flight, it would be the perfect opportunity to infiltrate his home for further clues. Determined to press on, Nomi and Amanita continued with their plan. Indeed, they did not go in vain. Peter's house had a computer, and Nomi prepared to copy the hard drive data. However, at that moment, Peter unexpectedly returned. Seeing Nomi, he assumed she had come because of the previous surgery incident, seemingly unaware of the real situation. It wasn't until Nomi inquired about Kolovi that Peter realized his secret had been exposed. Just then, Jonas appeared, urging everyone to leave immediately. Nomi was confused and asked why they needed to leave so urgently. Jonas only stated that if they didn't want to face danger, they needed to get out before Whispers arrived. Nomi was curious about who Whispers really was, and just then Todd appeared. Nomi was taken aback to see Todd, who immediately drew a gun. Amanita reacted quickly, spraying Todd with pepper spray. While Peter moved in to confront Todd, Nomi pulled out a USB containing the data they had gathered. The 3 of them then fled, but Todd quickly pursued them. However, it was clear that Todd's primary target was Peter. Peter found himself cornered at the end of the hallway with no escape. Ignoring Peter's pleas for mercy, Todd resolutely pulled the trigger, ending Peter's life. Afterward, Todd turned the gun on himself, ready to commit suicide. In that moment, Nomi glanced in the mirror and realized that Todd was actually Whispers. Although Nomi and Amanita had narrowly escaped, questions lingered in their minds. Why had they been exposed? Why did Todd kill Peter but spare them? These terrifying thoughts danced in the background, but Will was the one who noticed. Will discovered that Nomi had become a wanted criminal simply because she had visited Todd in the hospital. The next day, Todd appeared in public, dressed neatly. However, Will's teammates pointed at the screen, criticizing him for potentially endangering everyone with the leaked confidential information. It turned out that Will had used his father's ID to log into the system to search for Jonas, which led to the unearthing of even more secrets, all tying back to the Organization for Biological Protection. Simultaneously, Nomi was researching this organization, uncovering that it had a complex background and was focused on studying human genetic mutations. The research fund was linked to the Ministry of Defense, the World Scientific Fund, and the World Health Organization. At that moment, Will visited Nomi, and the 2 exchanged vital information. Nomi showed Will a photograph. It was a group picture with Dr. Peter, and standing behind Peter was Whispers. It was Whispers who had manipulated Todd into taking his own life. Just then, Whispers led a group of people to Nomi's house, introducing himself as a senior officer of the Organization for Biological Protection. Will recognized Whispers' voice as familiar. When he was very young, a friend of his had been taken by Whispers for surgery. Jonas had warned Will not to look into Whispers' eyes, explaining that was how Whispers tracked his targets. As Whispers prepared to break down the door, Nomi hurriedly ran to the balcony. Amanita intentionally went into the bathroom to draw attention, buying them some time. Seizing the opportunity, Nomi climbed down the building, but as soon as her feet hit the ground, she was met by police officers pointing guns at her. With guns trained on her, escape was impossible. In that critical moment, help arrived. Will quickly assessed the situation, and then Sun sprang into action. With just a few deft moves, Sun took down the officers, allowing Nomi to run for her life. She jumped on a bicycle and raced down the street, with police cars in pursuit. Nomi ducked into an alley and then dashed through a residential area to another avenue, narrowly avoiding a collision with a police vehicle. Just as she found a car parked on the Hiar side of the street, she realized she didn't know how to drive. At that moment, Kephius appeared, the bus driver who would be wasting his skills if he couldn't drive a car. He quickly took control of the situation, leading the police on a wild chase that provided Nomi with the chance she needed to escape. This was the first time the group of 8 super empaths collaborated. Even though only 4 of them were present, their combined strength was clearly visible. However, this might be their last collaboration, as Riley had been captured, putting the remaining 7 at risk of being caught as well. Not long before, the 8 super empaths had gathered for their first meeting. Riley led the other 7 to a concert. The music was so magnificent that it could even evoke the deepest memories. Everyone recalled the moment they were born, feeling love and pure happiness wash over them, to the point of shedding tears. But Riley didn't just remember her own birth, she also remembered the day her child was born. Turns out many years ago, she had been married in Iceland and had a baby. However, on the night she went into labor, a sudden snowstorm struck. As her husband drove to the hospital, they were involved in an accident. Their car rolled off a cliff, and Riley's husband died instantly. In the end, Riley gave birth to her child in the car. The freezing weather was dangerously harsh for the child, so Riley ran out into the street seeking help. In that desolate area, she cried out for help throughout the night, but encountered no one. Finally, Lisa sensed Riley's plight and helped her make a distress call. That moment marked the beginning of the pain that lingered in Riley's heart. Suddenly, during the concert, Riley collapsed. She was subsequently taken to the hospital by the biological organization. Once she regained consciousness in enemy territory, she saw Lisa in front of her, looking at the guard beside her. Lisa told Riley that this was her last chance. In a frantic moment, Riley flipped over and seized the guard's gun. Memories of a woman who had taken her own life with a gun flashed through her mind. However, Riley couldn't be as resolute now as she had been then. In an instant, the other 7 appeared. Realizing that her death could save many, Riley hesitated no longer. She pressed the gun to her mouth, Will stepped forward and tightly grasped Riley's hands, reassuring her that he would come to save her and urging her not to give up. The atmosphere softened slightly as nearby personnel quickly administered a sedative to Riley. After the injection, she was taken to meet Whispers, remaining unconscious. This prevented Whispers from establishing a connection, allowing Will the vital time he needed to reach Riley. With Nomi's support, Will was quickly arranged to fly to Iceland. After arriving, he jumped into a racing car. Following Nomi's advice, Will removed the oil pipe from the engine, causing the sports car to emit smoke and come to a halt in front of the base, successfully drawing a crowd of staff members to investigate. Seizing the opportunity, Will slipped into the building. However, the real challenge was just beginning. He used the identity created by Nomi to pass through the checkpoint. After scanning the code to enter, the system emitted an error message. The staff immediately grew tense, and some even considered calling security. Nomi quickly assessed the situation and discovered there was no fault with the system. Will then increased the brightness of his phone screen and tried again. This time, he succeeded. However, the building was enormous, and he had no way to locate Riley. Nomi couldn't assist him in this regard. Even hackers had their limitations. At that moment, Leto appeared. He mentioned that not everything needed to be solved with force. Approaching the last staff member who had contact with Riley, Leto subtly hinted at the other's charm, giving a flirtatious look. The woman immediately understood Leto's unspoken interest. A woman had let her guard down and became moved, and there was news that she couldn't answer about. What room was she in? Leto asked, pretending to be suave. Room 620 on the 6th floor, she replied. However, knowing Riley's room number was only part of the challenge, after rescuing her, how would they escape? Just then, Jonas arrived, stating that in 12 minutes, an ambulance would be leaving, their only chance to get Riley out of there. Meanwhile, Whispers was inquiring about Will's whereabouts, but Jonas, even at the cost of his life, refused to betray his friends. Recognizing the mounting danger, Whispers ordered an increase in security around Riley's location. As Will reached the 6th floor, he discovered that it was indeed crawling with enhanced guards. Just then, Sun appeared confidently, stating that this was merely a small matter. With a series of swift and decisive moves, Sun incapacitated all the guards, leaving them sprawled on the floor. Finally, Will managed to reach Riley, lifting her up to escape. However, running away in such a manner was too conspicuous. Will asked how to wake Riley, but Nomi admitted she didn't know. At that moment, Kala joined them. As a pharmaceutical employee, she quickly gathered several types of medication and mixed them together. She handed the concoction to Will to administer to Riley, and soon enough, Riley began to regain consciousness. Meanwhile, Whispers had grown impatient and was torturing Jonas, but Jonas remained steadfast and refused to utter a word. Back on the 6th floor, Will was pulling Riley into the elevator. But just as the elevator descended, Will and Whispers unexpectedly locked eyes. Everything began to unravel. Fortunately, Will managed to break through the encirclement, and he successfully boarded the ambulance. The vehicle pulled away safely. However, Whispers appeared beside Will, ominously claiming that everything Will saw and heard, he too could perceive. No matter where Will went, what he did, or what he thought, Whispers would always be with him. Despite this, Will was determined not to give up. He kept driving, persistently pushing forward, but Whispers ascended into a helicopter, fully aware of Will's destination. Jonas cautioned Will not to resist any further, stating that it was all over. Nomi and Amanita were confused and worried about the unfolding events, yet they were determined to find a way out for Will. They discovered a treacherous mountain path. The bad weather would prevent the helicopter from pursuing them too deeply, providing Will with a glimmer of hope. However, the helicopter had already flown ahead to block their path. Whispers bet that Will wouldn't dare to crash into his helicopter, but he underestimated Will's extraordinary resolve. In the end, Will and Riley successfully entered the intended route. Suddenly, Riley began to panic, becoming highly agitated. This was the place where she had lost her husband and child, and the memories overwhelmed her. She lost control, screaming continuously that she wanted to go back. Will couldn't continue driving under these circumstances and decided to stop. Riley flung open the car door and ran up the mountain, collapsing on the ground in utter despair. Will approached to comfort her, but his efforts were in vain. At that moment, Jonas appeared, urgently warning Will that time was running out. Whispers had gotten into a vehicle and would soon find Will. Once Will fell into Whispers' hands, he would quickly locate the rest of Will's teammates. Will had only one course of action: to protect his team. As they were a group of super empaths, Whispers needed only to connect with Will to sense the presence of the others. Finally, Will understood Angelica's feelings. Looking at Riley before him, he felt immense pain. Suddenly, he stood up and pulled out a handgun, but just as quickly, he shook his head repeatedly and tossed the gun aside. Instead, he ran back to the car, removed his jacket, and retrieved a syringe, injecting the liquid inside into his arm. Then he sat in the car to visit Riley. Will told Riley that Whispers could see him. He was inside Will's head. If Will lost consciousness, Whispers wouldn't be able to see what he saw. Therefore, Will injected himself with a drug that would temporarily knock him out. In 1 minute, he would lose consciousness. This was their only opportunity. Riley had to drive the ambulance to get them both out. It was the only and best way. However, Riley protested that she couldn't do it. She was paralyzed by the fear inside her. She apologized to Will, and he sensed the pain she was feeling. But Will loved Riley deeply and refused to give up on her. He urged her not to give up either. As he finished speaking, Will blacked out. After an unknown amount of time, Will regained consciousness and realized he was on a boat. Riley had succeeded. They were now safe. She retrieved the syringe and administered another injection to Will. Now, they just needed to reach a place not within Whisper's sight, and he wouldn't be able to find Will or the other 7. However, constantly running away wasn't a solution, as the man's consciousness could infiltrate the minds of their enemies, allowing him to observe the surroundings from the enemy's perspective. Right now, Whispers was experimenting with controlling this man's brain. Will could only watch as the man slowly approached and picked up a knife from the table. He then made his way to a gathering of the mob bosses, where he brutally killed a research staff member with one swift strike. This wild act yanked Will right back to reality. The empathic superpower had a significant flaw. While you knew the location of your enemy knew your location as well. This made Whisper's experiment inhumane. Since Will had disappeared, he had remained on high alert, but there were times when Whispers infiltrated his mind, leading to intense confrontations between them. With his many years of experience as a police officer, Will possessed sharp investigative skills. By analyzing the shoes and outfit he observed, he quickly deduced that Whispers was conducting research within a military base. Furthermore, by examining the type of socket nearby, he surmised that Whispers was likely in England. Whispers, being a seasoned adversary, slowly approached the wall, pulled out a plug, and held it up in front of Will. He said that everything there was designed to deceive Will, and the outfit he was looking at was merely a costume. Will found himself at a loss, unable to determine Whisper's precise location. The sounds of waves and birds he heard while in Iceland were all fabricated. Now, it was Whisper's turn to guess where Will might be. In a church as ancient as this one, it struck Will that it might resemble the hideout of his mother from the past. The unsettling thought crossed his mind that he could meet a similar fate as hers. Will's expression turned to one of horror as he urgently instructed Riley to quickly administer the tranquilizer to him in order to sever the connection with Whispers. Without hesitation, Riley turned off the sound of the simulation. Both sides created illusions to deceive each other, but Will remained relentless in his pursuit of finding Whispers. He recalled a young girl he had encountered in his childhood. childhood and decided to visit her mother's home, believing he might uncover some clues there. Meanwhile, Nomi updated everyone on Will's situation. Betrell, upon hearing this, felt a deep pang of sorrow for him. Amanita took out a photo and asked if the old woman had seen Angelica. After glancing at the photo, the woman confirmed that Angelica was an ecologist who had come to visit her daughter. Furthermore, she revealed that Whispers had helped Angelica considerably during that time. Angelica had mentioned that Whispers was her daughter's tutor. Realizing the danger, Will understood that the girl had been victimized by Whispers. He vowed that he would not allow Whispers to live in peace. Now, all they needed to do was bide their time, waiting to uncover Whispers' whereabouts for a counterattack. Suddenly, Will experienced an involuntary spasm, prompting the remaining members of the group to convene. He saw Whispers conversing with someone, and outside the window were tall buildings, confirming his suspicion that they were in London. Observing the contract on the table and the distinctive ring on the man's hand, along with the intricately carved wooden decor, Will relayed each detail to Nomi. In quick succession, they identified the person Whispers was conversing with. Whispers realized he may have been discovered and hastily pulled out a suppressive drug, intent on cutting off the flow of information. Unfortunately for him, it was too late. Nomi had pinpointed his location, the prey had turned into the hunter, and the real battle between them was just beginning. Meanwhile, Sun was abruptly awakened by the police, yanked from her sleep, with her hands shackled behind her back. As the officers chambered their weapons, she sensed that something was horribly wrong. But there was no opportunity to explain. She was forcefully escorted away, and it was evident they intended to kill her. Seizing the moment, Sun kicked one of the officers, using her agility to deftly dodge their attempts to restrain her. Back in the prison, Nomi was infiltrating the smart lock system, and just when her teammates were preparing to counterattack, the police fired a taser gun. Sun was hit, convulsing from the electric shock, rendering her helpless. The officers responded by looping a rope around Sun's neck, preparing to pull tightly. Despite the dire situation, Sun managed to strike back, but the electricity from the taser overwhelmed her, and she lost consciousness. The police hung her up, leaving the others feeling as if they were suffocating. In this moment of critical urgency, a woman burst in and attacked one of the officers. This distraction gave Sun the opportunity to regain her senses and join the fight. Within moments, they overwhelmed the officers. Sun and her team quickly analyzed the situation, realizing that the individual with a vendetta against her was likely her younger brother. They needed to make a rapid exit from the prison, starting with finding a means of transportation. In no time, Capheus managed to locate a vehicle and approach the gate, but was met with resistance. That's when Leto appeared, employing his exceptional acting skills to deceive the guards. With Nomi hacking into the prison system, they finally managed to orchestrate Sun's escape. Once out, they could move freely, unhindered by Whisper's watchful eyes. It was crucial that they had initially identified Whisper's vulnerabilities and seized the initiative. However, they were shocked to discover that there was someone even more powerful behind Whispers, a mysterious boss. Will demanded a direct confrontation with Whisper's superior. Whispers initially planned to refuse, but Nomi had already uncovered the boss's whereabouts. Whispers, sensing the impending confrontation, tried to lie and cover up the situation, but Will intervened, warning him that if he continued to manipulate Will's brain, he would face dire consequences. The information regarding the boss was relayed, demanding a direct encounter. The boss, perplexed by why he had been so easily discovered, concluded that Whispers had outlived his usefulness. In a ruthless decision, he ordered his henchmen to sedate Whispers and take him away. As soon as Will realized he was no longer under surveillance, it felt like a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. After years of evasion, he finally stood under the sunlight, taking deep breaths of fresh air. When he met the boss at the art gallery, the other party showed great goodwill, and the boss even gave Will a bottle of suppressant medication. However, to Will's shock, a woman suddenly lunged at the boss, revealing that Whispers had manipulated her to carry out this assassination. After taking care of the boss, the woman turned her lethal intent toward Will. In the ensuing struggle, it became clear to the woman that she couldn't overpower Will. In a desperate move, she chose to end her own life rather than continue. Will, confused by Whisper's motives, realized that this was part of a trap aimed at the group of 8. Whispers intended to capture all of them. Meanwhile, Sun took down the police that stood in her way and made her escape. She blended into the crowd, observing the situation unfold. Leto, disguised as Riley, provided backup nearby. Using his flamboyant acting skills, he engaged the police with a panicked demeanor, claiming that terrorists were attacking. The officers, bewildered, were forced to comfort Riley, giving Will the opportunity to slip away with the others. Thinking they had broken free from Whisper's snare, Sun soon found herself in a new predicament. The Seoul police were on the lookout for the escaped convicts. Upon checking a house, the officers quickly discovered that Sun was fleeing. The pursuit led to the rooftop, where the police police unleashed a volley of gunfire aimed at her. With no escape route, Sun had no choice but to stop and comply. The police signaled for her to raise her hands, and Sun cooperated, appearing to surrender. However, as they prepared to cuff her, she seized the moment to fight back. The officer, recalling a past encounter when he had also been bested by Sun, tried to defend himself. In the end, the confrontation ended with Sun landing a decisive punch, knocking him out cold. Sun returned to find the elderly woman, hoping they could escape together. However, the old woman insisted that she would only be a burden to Sun. No matter how much Sun pleaded, the elderly woman remained steadfast in her decision. Heartbroken, Sun decided to seek out her master instead, formulating a plan to take revenge on her younger brother, who had falsely accused her. Meanwhile, Leto had made an important discovery. There was a journalist known to possess empathic abilities. Determined to learn more, Leto sought out the journalist's father. Aware of the connection between his son and Leto, the father provided him with crucial leads. As they sifted through the journalist's house, Nomi suggested taking some photos of Angelica, believing that it might lead them to new clues. The father of the journalist then handed Leto a tape that his son had hidden. Inside, there was footage of the journalist lying on an operating table, numerous devices attached to his head. It became clear that Whispers was behind this, attempting to see if he could control the journalist. The results of the experiment seemed to please Whispers immensely. The journalist's father expressed his disapproval of these unethical experiments and described Whispers as a cunning villain. When Leto inquired about the last phone call between the father and his son, the father recounted that his son hadn't said much after answering the call, and his instincts told him that something terrible had happened to him. After hearing the father's story, Leto pledged to avenge the journalist. However, the connection between this event and Angelica still eluded him. Meanwhile, the group of 8 was once again immersed in memories of Jonas. This time, Jonas had come to bid them farewell, as Whispers had deemed him no longer useful and decided to eliminate him. The staff soon pushed Jonas into the operating room for a lobotomy, serving as a grim warning to the remaining members of the empathic group. Shortly thereafter, Whispers approached Will, claiming that he would no longer pursue him. Naturally, Will was skeptical of such a sudden change of heart. Whispers explained that he was researching ways to eliminate the weaknesses of empathic individuals, boasting that once successful, they would form the most powerful tribe. He even extended an invitation to Will to join his research. Will quickly rejected the proposal, recognizing it as nonsense, given that Whispers had already killed many empathic individuals, including Angelica. Whispers coldly remarked that sacrifice was necessary on the road to success, and he brazenly stated that Angelica had believed him. Her decision to end her life stemmed from her realization of the truth, which had driven her to despair. But Will wasn't easily swayed by Whispers' manipulation. He realized that to combat Whispers' secret organization, they couldn't continue to hide. They needed to find the tribe and launch their counterattack. With that determination in mind, Riley returned to her work as a DJ. She used music to express her feelings. Riley hoped that super empathic individuals could join them in their fight, breaking free from the darkness that had surrounded them for so long. During the climax of her set, she sensed a kindred spirit in the crowd. Suddenly, an old man appeared on stage, experiencing a feeling he had never felt before. However, upon realizing he had been spotted, he quickly made his exit. The group of 8 had acted daringly this time, but Whispers was also present, and the police were advancing toward the center of the stage. All the super empathic individuals started to disperse, but a seed of rebellion had been sown in their hearts. The team had prepared an escape plan and made their way to a boat at the dock. With resolve in their eyes, they successfully evaded Whisper's watchful gaze. At that moment, Lila cautiously entered a room, her firearm equipped with a silencer. She confidently barged into the enemy's secret meeting space. 2 shots fired, taking down the heavyset man who was about to stand up. She quickly swung around and shot another henchman who was reaching for his weapon. Now, only the bald leader remained, who tried to stall for time, waiting for backup. However, Leela was quick on her feet. She turned and fired another shot at a nearby goon before the bald man could make a sneak attack. With ease, she took him out as well. This seamless action was largely due to the guidance she received from Wolfgang. He had shown her pictures of Whispers and convinced her of the necessity of eliminating him. Yet in Lila's eyes, there was a palpable reluctance to follow through with Wolfgang's plan. Just then, Will suddenly penetrated Whisper's mind. Will saw a shadow that resembled a young girl and quickly moved to the cupboard to search for the device that could block the suppressive tracking. He didn't want to risk being under Whispers' surveillance again. However, he felt something was still amiss. Concerned, he sought out Wolfgang, urging him to stay alert. Earlier, when Will and his friends had successfully evaded Whisper's grasp, he and Riley had switched their hiding spots. To their surprise, on the train, they encountered the old man from the performance. He was skeptical that super empathic individuals individuals would suddenly come looking for him, and he was adamant about not getting involved in Will and Riley's plans. In a secluded room, Will and Riley were enjoying a moment together when an super empathic individual abruptly appeared. He urged Riley to hurry, excited to witness everything firsthand. His eagerness made Riley blush deeply, causing her to quickly change the subject. Curious, she asked how he had managed to escape Whisper's pursuit. The newcomer, Shuggs, revealed that he had successfully developed a drug to suppress empathic abilities. While he recognized Riley as an empath, he expressed his reluctance to associate with her kind. Afterward, when Riley returned to the area, she encountered the old man again, whose name was Anton. To convince Anton that she wasn't an ally of Whisper's, Riley decided to disclose something that would earn his trust: her own location. She dashed up to the rooftop to show Anton the exact spot where she and Will were hiding. Seeing Riley's sincerity and willingness to share such personal information, Anton finally began to believe her. Anton also took Riley to see his research laboratory, enthusiastically introducing her to his quiet and beautiful home. He had been living in seclusion there for decades and felt very comfortable. Aware of Anton's extensive connections, Riley asked for his help in locating Whispers, and Anton happily agreed to assist her. Meanwhile, Nomi and the girlfriend discovered something horrifying as they followed clues to a cabin in the woods. This was once the home of Angelica, but to their shock, they found it reduced to rubble. Nomi realized that Angelica had been quite close to Whispers in the past, and that the journalist's death was linked to her actions. Angelica had burned down the cabin to conceal the truth, leaving everything shrouded in ambiguity. It raised unsettling questions. Had Angelica truly collaborated with their enemy, Whispers, and what were her intentions? On another front, Sun was attempting to pay her respects to her parents, but found no peace. The police officer who had once pursued her sought her out, offering his help in gathering clues. However, Sun rejected his assistance. Frustrated with his relentless pursuit, she seized the opportunity to vent her anger and slapped him hard. The officer, taken aback, realized that his confidence had been misplaced. Their ensuing fight was intense, lasting for what felt like hundreds of exchanges. At one point, Sun nearly lost her balance and fell down the stairs, but the officer caught her just in time. Instead of feeling grateful, Sun turned and knocked him unconscious, remarking on his progress before walking away. Her focus remained on Riley and the urgent matters at hand. Earlier, in her quest for answers, Riley had traveled to Chicago alone. On the flight, she encountered another individual with empathic abilities. It was a person wearing a robe, and it felt like she was the ancient sorceress. The sorceress said a profound sentence: every life had to endure certain forces that we could neither control nor understand. Afterward, Riley went to Chicago's square, fearing she would be recognized and taken away. Fortunately, a former colleague of Will helped her. Later, Anton reminded Riley to go to the old church, which was also the place where Angelica had taken her own life. Everyone followed into the church, but inside, it was empty with no one around. Following Anton's instructions, Riley went into the basement alone, and no one else was allowed to follow. However, Will was very worried, so everyone went down to the basement. What caught their eyes was a table with a glass of water and suppressant medication on it. Clearly, the content of the conversation was something not meant to be known by many people. This made it difficult for Riley to make a choice, as she didn't know what the outcome would be. Will said that if Riley didn't contact him in 5 minutes, he would send people to look for her. Afterward, Riley took the suppressant medication, and the 8 others immediately withdrew. A woman who claimed to be a scholar appeared and told them about Angelica. The organization that protected creatures had initially been good, but it started to corrupt when Whispers appeared. Perhaps it was because the angelic tribe had chosen to end their lives. Eventually, the scholar handed Riley an address, signaling the end of her current task. However, just as she was about to leave, an unexpected disruption occurred. Jonas had returned from the dead. His sudden appearance threw everyone into chaos. Not long after, Leto found himself out of work. He no longer had any films to act in, resulting in a loss of both job and fans. He collapsed onto the street, wishing to experience the depths of despair and helplessness. Sun approached him to inquire about what was wrong, but to her, it seemed like nothing serious. Uninterested in wasting time, she turned away. Seeing Sun's dismissive reaction, Leto followed her, ultimately collapsing onto a bed and weeping loudly. He lamented about his failures in his acting career, spiraling into deeper sorrow. Sun attempted to console Leto, reminding him that losing a job was not the end of the world. He still had a loving girlfriend and a mother who accepted him entirely. In contrast, Sun had lost her parents and had a younger brother who wanted to harm her. Compared to Sun's situation, Leto's problems seemed trivial. Hearing about Sun's hardships weighed heavily on Leto's heart. The next morning, he remained in a melancholic state, crying while mixing wine. Nomi, sitting nearby, mentioned that Sun's younger brother would be holding a press conference and that to attend, they would need an invitation letter. However, Sun needed to know how to mix wine to prepare prepare for it. Leaving her feeling hopeless and unsure of what to do, 3 women unconsciously turned their gazes toward Leto, realizing that with him stepping up, they could find a resolution. Meanwhile, at the address provided by the scholar at the church, Will searched for Whispers, but came up empty-handed. Suddenly, special forces appeared, taking Whispers away, causing them to miss yet another chance to confront him. However, Wolfgang believed there might still be some clues left behind. Without hesitation, he dashed into the villa. Once inside, Wolfgang discovered a safe on the 2nd floor. He began to spin the dial repeatedly, and as he worked on decoding it, Will looked on with a mixture of surprise and anticipation. Inside the safe, they found several documents related to Whispers. This discovery made their trip worthwhile after all. That evening, Wolfgang and Lila met at a hotel restaurant, where Lila extended an invitation to Wolfgang to become the king of their tribe, urging him to help create a free nation together. Wolfgang, however, declined, stating that their differing ideals made it impossible for them to share a common goal. Given that negotiations had failed, their only remaining option was to settle things through combat. Thus began the official conflict between the 2 tribes. Lila smashed a bottle of wine on the table, causing sparks to fly and marking a clear divide between the factions. Almost immediately, a fierce gunfight erupted. The fight continued until their ammunition ran out, forcing both sides to resort to hand-to-hand combat to settle the matter. The opposing side had a wild young boy joining the fray, and on this side there was Sun. One punch from her caused immense pain to everyone on the opposing team, and both sides exchanged blows in a fierce contest. Sun executed a powerful headbutt that nearly knocked an opponent out. Hearing the police sirens, Lila immediately began to wail, claiming she had been assaulted. Wolfgang, sensing the precarious situation, quickly fled, recognizing that this was not a favorable turn of events for him. The next day marked Nomi's younger sister's wedding, which unexpectedly turned chaotic. Federal agents burst into the venue, announcing their intention to arrest Nomi. Nomi's mother sat nearby, scolding her for ruining her younger sister's wedding. In a desperate attempt to keep the wedding on track, Nomi's father urged her to go with the agents, promising he would find a way to help her later. Nomi felt utterly powerless. Previously, she had managed to have her arrest warrant cleared, but now she found herself back on the hackers' radar again. How did this happen? Just as Nomi was about to be taken, Amanita rushed forward to intervene. She declared that the police had no authority to arrest Nomi and disrupt this sacred wedding ceremony. If they wanted to take Nomi, they needed to produce a warrant. Faced with the outraged crowd's reaction, the police checked the arrest warrant again, only to find there was none. The officers grew anxious, contemplating a more forceful approach to detain Nomi. Unexpectedly, Nomi's father stood his ground, insisting they not touch Nomi. He threatened to sue them if they did. Frustrated but constrained by their duties, the officers had no choice but to leave. Nomi, relieved, was finally able to participate in her younger sister's wedding. With the situation on Nomi's side resolved, new revelations awaited Riley. Indiana, the police station, she had uncovered information about a PhD who had been in contact with the journalist. Following the address, Riley made her way to the small house of the PhD. Using her super empathic abilities, she discovered that both Angelica and Whispers had been here at some point. What secrets lay hidden between them? Cautiously, Riley entered the house. The food on the table was moldy, indicating that it had been a long time since anyone had lived there. At that moment, Riley visualized a scene where Angelica was helping the journalist down to the basement. Instantly, she descended the stairs. The basement turned out to be a small laboratory, where the footage of the journalist had been recorded. As she touched the bed frame, a wave of pain surged through her. When she made contact with the connection cap, the images she witnessed grew increasingly disturbing. To her shock, she realized that Whispers intended to annihilate the tribe. Those who defied him were ruthlessly executed. Suddenly, Riley stumbled upon a hidden room. Inside, there was a mattress and a pillow, clearly enough space for one person. This sight triggered a memory. She recalled Angelica's repeated apologies before her death. Riley was left grappling with the haunting question: why had Angelica done that? As Riley ascended the stairs, she caught sight of a bloody knife on the floor. It turned out that the PhD had taken his own life by cutting his wrist and subsequently drowning in the bathtub. Had the trail of clues come to an end there? Meanwhile, Will, using his empathic abilities, became aware of something unusual among various identity documents related to Whispers. He quickly instructed Riley to return home. However, he soon received devastating news. His father was on the brink of death. Watching his father breathe his last, Will expressed his sorrow, lamenting that he was too far away to say goodbye properly. Yet, despite the distance, his father was still able to see his son, albeit through Riley's face. Regrettably, Will's father passed away, leaving him in despair and heartbreak, deeply pained at the thought of not being able to bid farewell to his loved one. On another front, Sun schemed to infiltrate the cheerleading squad to execute a decisive blow against her brother. However, an unexpected complication arose during the selection selection process when the manager decided to test everyone's drink mixing skills. If she failed, her cover could be blown, and she found herself in a precarious situation. At that moment, Leto was preparing to audition for an important role. The two of them, tapping into their empathic abilities, seamlessly switched places. Leto took a bottle of liquor and executed an impressive series of maneuvers, successfully completing the task with ease. The resulting captivating mixed drink impressed the manager. Simultaneously, Sun's sincerity won over the renowned director, who was charmed by her dedication. This ultimately secured Leto's significant role in the project. When Leto attended the gala hosted by the esteemed director, he found himself mingling with the elite and finally realized his dream. Seeing Leto in his somewhat shabby outfit, the designer was inspired on the spot, transforming Leto into the embodiment of a superhero character. This stylish look even earned praise from Capheus, who, in addition to being a supporter, was also scheduled to give a speech. When he reached the podium and faced the dense crowd, Capheus felt a surge of anxiety as he was met by a sea of enthusiastic supporters. His legs felt heavy, and he struggled to lift them. Sensing his distress, a friend rushed over to help him navigate the situation, encouraging him to face the crowd with courage, reminding him to treat it like driving a bus. Furthermore, all 8 of them, his friends, were present as a solid support system for Capheus. With newfound resolve, Capheus finally managed to take a bold step forward and approach the microphone. He delivered a heartfelt speech that resonated with the audience, and at last his words were well received. However, to hinder the community's support for Capheus, his competitors began inciting chaos among the crowd. The situation rapidly spiraled out of control. Capheus desperately tried to calm the people down, but his efforts were in vain. A group of extremists surged forward, clashing violently with security. Their intention was clear: they wanted to kill Capheus. Amidst the pandemonium, Capheus was suddenly stabbed, leaving him momentarily dazed and unable to distinguish friend from foe. Just then, a security personnel grabbed Capheus, reaching into their pocket to pull out a knife. Will sensed that his teammate was in danger and rushed to remind Capheus of the impending threat. Just as the security personnel swung the knife, Sun appeared out of nowhere to stop the attack, countering with a powerful punch. In that tense moment, Mark, someone who had previously had issues with Capheus, charged into the fray. He fired his weapon, striking the assailant who had been closing in on Capheus. Mark then shielded Capheus as they retreated together, commandeering a nearby car to escape the chaotic scene. Seeing Mark brandishing his gun toward him, Capheus felt an immediate surge of anxiety, but Will urged him to remain calm, assuring him that Mark meant him no harm. With Capheus's immediate crisis resolved, the focus shifted to Sun, whose gripping story was about to unfold. The dinner party for her younger brother was proceeding as planned, and it was finally time for Sun to confront the turmoil that had been brewing for so long. A dark expression clouded her face as she gripped a long metal rod, slowly advancing toward her frightened younger brother. She raised the rod as if to strike him down, but could she really go through with it? At a recent dinner party, Chung-Ki had made false statements that pierced Sun's heart. Each word felt like a betrayal. He had murdered their father for wealth and then cast all the blame upon her. Enraged, Sun grabbed a fruit knife from the table, plotting to sneak up on this deceitful younger brother and put an end to his treachery. But unexpectedly, the police stormed in, leading a group of officers to arrest Chung-Ki. Desperate to avoid capture, Chung-Ki drew his handgun and fired at the police, instantly plunging the scene into chaos. When Chung-Ki caught sight of his sister not far away, a wave of fear washed over him. He ordered his henchmen to eliminate Sun, leaving her with no choice but to find a place to hide. With the support of her friends, Sun quickly launched a fierce counterattack and made her way to the basement. A group of men chased after her, but just in time, Kala fired a shot that shattered the gas tank of several cars. She then tossed down a lighter, igniting an explosion that erupted immediately, incinerating the security personnel hiding behind the vehicles. As Chung-Ki prepared to flee the basement, Nomi infiltrated the underground parking lot, blocking his escape route. She made it clear that if Chung-Ki sincerely apologized to Sun, she would spare him. However, stubborn as ever, Chung-Ki violently smashed through the obstacle and attempted to escape. Capheus to grab a motorcycle, using the information from Nomi to pursue Chung-Ki. As Chung-Ki waited at a red light, he felt a sense of triumph for having evaded Sun. However, when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he was shocked to see his sister closing in on him. His heart raced, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "No way, she's turned into a destroyer." The chase continued through the bustling city, but despite her relentless pursuit, Sun struggled to catch up to Chung-Ki. Meanwhile, Wolfgang, deep in thought, knew they had to find a way to make him stop the vehicle. Wolfgang grabbed a metal rod from the side of the road and chased after Chung-Ki. He courageously thrust the rod into the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to abruptly collide with car in front, resulting in a significant crash. The vehicle flipped multiple times in the air before crashing to the ground. Chung-ki, injured, crawled out of the wreckage, desperately trying to escape. At that moment, Sun approached the vehicle, slowly extracting the metal rod. Memories of the humiliation she had endured over the years flooded back, and her anger surged uncontrollably. She was determined to kill the younger brother who had betrayed her and caused her so much pain once and for all. However, a lingering gentleness within her caused her to hesitate. She ultimately dropped the weapon, only to be handcuffed and taken away by the police. Meanwhile, Chung-ki, feeling relieved that he had narrowly escaped, no longer felt fear. Instead, he became consumed by a desire for revenge. The group of 8, aware that if Sun went to prison, her fate would be grim, knew they had to find a way to help her escape. Under Nomi's leadership, they staged a traffic accident, providing Sun with the opportunity to crawl out of the vehicle. The sound of approaching police sirens echoed in the distance, and it became clear that there was no time left to escape via the subway. Just then, a long-haired man with super empathic abilities appeared, assisting Sun in fleeing the chaotic scene. Once they were safe, the group regrouped to strategize their next move. However, a major twist occurred. Lila had unexpectedly allied with Whispers. She discovered Wolfgang's whereabouts, which led to an intense gunfight between both parties. Unfortunately, Lila was armed with a stun gun this time, swiftly incapacitating the entire group of 8. When Wolfgang woke up, he found himself on the operating table. Whispers wanted to find out the leader behind Wolfgang, so he used electricity to shock Wolfgang, causing him to lose consciousness. After waiting for Wolfgang's resistance to weaken, Whispers infiltrated Wolfgang's mind. Sure enough, Whispers saw Kala's flight ticket. Still not satisfied, he needed to know how many people were inside Wolfgang's head. Will knew that now was the time to counterattack, or else their entire clan would be captured. Will asked Jonas what to do to stop this, and Jonas said the only way was to give Whispers what he wanted. If not, it would end like Angelica before. Will immediately ignored the idea of self-sacrifice and turned to confront Whispers, demanding that he release the people. However, Whispers was not afraid of his opponent, believing that he and Will were having a telepathic encounter, but unexpectedly, Will suddenly grabbed Whispers by the collar and beat him mercilessly. Even then, Will wasn't satisfied and pushed Whispers into a corner, continuing to torment him. Whispers begged in pain, but of course, Will would not show mercy. After that, Sun's group disguised themselves and infiltrated the base. They successfully got Whispers out, and the counterattack officially began. Meanwhile, Wolfgang's past slowly began to unfold. In his childhood, Wolfgang had drugged his own father and then thrown him into a car before setting it ablaze. No one understood why Wolfgang would commit such an act, questioning how a child could be so extreme. The truth lay deep within his family dynamics. Everything was tied to his mother. Wolfgang's alcoholic father would come home and brutally beat his wife, who, in a shocking twist, was Wolfgang's own sister. Faced with his father's atrocious behavior, Wolfgang decided to end his father's life. Now confronting his enemies, Wolfgang launched a frenzied counterattack, taking down everyone in his path. When he witnessed fellow empaths being subjected to inhumane experiments, Wolfgang realized that if he didn't sever the root of the problem, his friends would endure endless suffering. There were moments when Wolfgang contemplated ending his own life to protect his friends. Fortunately, Kala intervened just in time, advising him not to make such a reckless decision. Faced with Wolfgang's stubbornness, Kala ran straight to the balcony, intending to jump. In a panic, Wolfgang rushed over to pull her back, and it was in that moment, driven by his love for her, that he discarded his extreme thoughts. Returning to the present, the group of 8 was now strategizing on how to exchange Wolfgang for Whispers. During this time, news broke that Sun's younger brother had been arrested. The police discovered that Chung-ki was responsible for their father's murder, resulting in a life sentence for him. Sun's name was finally cleared, lifting the burden that had weighed heavily on her. However, the situation was far from over. Will's group of super empaths continued to evade capture, and their main priority now was to negotiate Wolfgang's release. Once both sides reached an agreement, the hostage exchange commenced. In the flashing lights of a bar, they forced Whispers forward to make the exchange. But then, an unexpected incident occurred. A nun suddenly appeared and stabbed Whispers. In the ensuing chaos, Will rushed to engage the attackers. Amidst the confusion, Whispers managed to slip away into the crowd and disappeared. Later being escorted by Lila's group, Wolfgang, deemed worthless, was nearly shot, but fortunately, Kala arrived just in time to save him. The arrangements in place began to release smoke, which quickly spread throughout the bar. Everyone hastily evacuated the scene. After Lila rescued Whispers, she ruthlessly eliminated all the security personnel on their escape, followed by shooting down all the police officers as well. She then transferred Whispers to another vehicle and fled. When Will's group arrived, they found no trace of anyone. After an intense investigation, they discovered that Lila had taken Whispers to Naples. Now that Wolfgang had been rescued safely, the remaining task was to eliminate Whispers. Only then could they live without constant fear of being hunted. After tracking down Whisper's location, they disguised themselves as a group of tourists to approach his hideout. Even when obstructed by the security forces inside, they feigned that their tour vehicle had broken down. As the vehicle seemed to stall, they created a diversion by throwing their luggage and jumping out of the car, resulting in a massive explosion. This marked the beginning of their sharp counteroffensive aimed at eliminating all enemies. They split into smaller groups to search for Whisper's confinement area, moving forward with fierce determination. A gunshot rang out, taking down an enemy, and initially, everything unfolded smoothly. However, it wasn't long before injuries occurred. Will was struck by a bullet during the firefight, and Wolfgang's close friend fell victim as well. When Lila learned that the group of 8 was attacking, she immediately decided to relocate Whispers. Kala, witnessing the situation, rushed to take action, wanting to prevent Layla from escaping. Unfortunately, she was no match for Lila and was shot in the abdomen. The group felt a deep anguish as a sharp pain coursed through their bodies. Wolfgang, seeing Kala in that state, broke down and cried. Weakly, Kala, in her empathetic form, uttered, "Is no one going to save me? Or are you just going to watch me die in your arms?" At that moment, 2 men sprang into action to provide first aid, one using clothing to elevate her head, while the other pressed down tightly on her wound. Ultimately, thanks to a defibrillator, they managed to bring Kala back from the brink. Now that Whispers had managed to escape, they had to stop him at the helicopter landing site. At that moment, Jonas suddenly appeared next to Will. After swiftly taking down the enemy wearing protective gear, he pushed a bomb into the BPO's base. Jonas then revealed the entire truth to Will. Angelica had collaborated with Whispers to develop a helmet that connected super empathic groups. However, Angelica withheld part of her findings rather than sharing everything. Moreover, she had arranged for a man and a woman to work together. Unfortunately, the man betrayed her and intended to expose Angelica's plans. Before he could act, the woman killed him to protect their mission. This woman then stormed into the base carrying a bomb, with Angelica having tasked her with assassinating the president of the BPO, under the belief that it would allow empaths to live better lives. However, before she could complete her mission, she was shot dead, leaving the BPO president still alive and at the center of the ongoing chaos. At that moment, Jonas had taken control of a researcher, forcing him to shoot the president of the BPO. Fulfilling his earlier promise to Angelica, Jonas successfully destroyed the BPO base, while Will simultaneously charged into the enemy's encirclement. Gunfire echoed as he fought fiercely, putting in significant effort to take down the security personnel. Unfortunately, Lila and Whispers managed to board the helicopter and escape. As Will sighed in frustration over their foes slipping away, Wolfgang approached the trunk of a vehicle and retrieved a rocket launcher. He took aim at the helicopter, and with a resounding boom, he struck a perfect hit. The enemies were engulfed in the explosion, turning to ashes in the aftermath. Eventually, everyone regrouped at the Eiffel Tower, where they organized a joyous celebration. At long last, the empaths could live the lives they had always dreamed of, free from fear and persecution. And so, the film draws to a close here, wishing you all enjoyable moments as you watch.